When the war started February 28th, I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks because I was so anxious and afraid. I'm just worried about the world. Yeah, so March was really hard. There were also some attacks against me. There was clearly a smear campaign that was coordinated because certain influencers were using the same talking points.
On the last appearance you had on my stream, you mentioned how you thought the Patrick Bet-David show was going to be a setup. You got it spot on.
I will be on his show tomorrow. I've agreed to go on his show. You look at a guy like Peter Hegseth, whenever he does a press conference, I swear to God, it's almost like he talks war as though he's having an orgasm. I mean, do you get that impression where like he just loves this, right?
Yeah.
When he says like negotiating with bombs, it's like he's climaxing. I'm being amplified throughout social media. I don't think it's organic. I'm being amplified and given more prominence than I should be. The question is, why is this happening? One suspicion I have is that this social division is also part of the playbook. If this war is meant to move towards the end of the world and the Great Reset, then you need civil war throughout the Western world. Why aren't we protesting this war in Iran? Why aren't we protesting what Israel is doing in Lebanon? Why aren't we protesting the fact that Israel seems to be targeting everyone? Why hasn't anyone protested the fact that America, at the first day of the war, killed the leader of Iran, which is against international law, and also killed 168 innocent schoolgirls? Why aren't there any protests against that? So all this is really weird. And now you have AI. And the AI revolution, it's not about replacing blue-collar workers. You can't do that. It's about replacing white-collar workers, the lawyers, the accountants, the doctors, the professors, the high school teachers. The elite wants this war in Iran, and Trump is doing that. And as long as Trump keeps this war going, then the elite will allow him to get away with anything. But once he's out of office, then he'll be destroyed. If you were to take this theology literally, what it's telling you is that there's only 600,000 humans in this world, and everyone else is just an animal soul. Everyone else is an animal that's taking up space, so like you should try to clear up as many of them as possible. There are these religious extremists in Israel who do not see anyone outside of Israel who is not Jewish as a human being. That's why that phrase like mowing the lawn, right? Mm-hmm. Like imagine killing people as like mowing the lawn because there are weeds and we have to mow the lawn.
Hello everyone, this is my third interview with Professor Jiang amidst a war that he predicted on his YouTube channel called Predictive History, as well as a massive coordinated attack on his character and his name because of minor things like jokes about the Messiah, also his internet moniker, Professor Jiang, although he's a high school teacher, which he spells out in his lectures, which many people seem to have not watched and have only developed an opinion based off of short clips. I was very exhausted in this interview. I have been editing my new main channel video interviewing strangers about the Iran war. I apologize for making a silly mistake that I would have not made if I had been able to sleep without editing nonstop for the past several days. I said Angel Jibril instead of the Jinn of Iblis when it came to the origins of Satan. Similar to Professor Jiang, who mentions in this interview that he had not slept for 2 weeks during the month of March, and his massive rise to fame, and also being glued to the news and reading every single major development going on in this catastrophic war. I hope you enjoyed this interview, and please forgive me. Also support the new video on my main channel called @SNEAKO on YouTube. My second channel with the stream clips like this one is my second channel @SNEAKO. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hey, Professor, can you hear me?
Hi, SNEAKO.
Good to hear from you again. How long it's been a while.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a while because the world is ending, but yeah.
Yeah, things. I don't even know if I can call you a professor anymore. I'm still gonna call you Professor.
Well, thank you. Yeah. No, I don't know why in the middle of a war, when there's so many real issues, the issue that seems to obsess a lot of people is whether or not I'm a credentialed professor. And I've already said I'm not a credentialed professor. I teach at a high school. I don't have a BA. It is something the internet calls me. In China, people call me professor as well because it's a sign of respect. So, yeah.
It's ridiculous. I mean, again, the that guy Mehdi Hassan, it seems like he's on the right side about so many issues. I think a lot of people don't actually watch your long form content. So many people that are part of this attack campaign against you, they're seeing clips taken out of context. One where you're making a joke about the Messiah, and it's like, does he want to start a cult? I'm like, he's so clearly joking. I watch your lectures. I really appreciate the work you do, and I didn't get to see the new Trump one, but I recently saw the Pax Judaica Rising. I'm always taking notes. And you say in almost all your lectures that you're a high school teacher. So they really don't have anything on you.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're obsessed with this particular issue. So there have been three major attacks against me. The first is whether or not I'm a professor, and clearly I'm not a professor, and I've been very honest and candid about this. The second is that I am an anti-Semite, that I'm a Holocaust denier, and that's something that I've addressed before. And the third is that I'm a spy. And depending on the time of day, I'm either a spy for Mossad or a spy for the CIA or for the Communist Party, or I'm a secret society. I'm Skull and Bones. It's silly how many accusations I get that I'm a spy. But we can talk about any of this if you want.
I mean, you said it correctly. There's so much more important things to talk about right now. There's been major developments. I'm sure you saw the tweet from Trump saying, praise be to Allah, and cursing at 5 a.m. and saying, open up the effing Strait of Hormuz, again, which you predicted. I would like to see more people give you credit for that, because if you watch your lectures, you really spelled out the asymmetrical warfare correctly, the strategy that Iran is using about the downfall of American empire being hubris, which is so clearly why Trump is making all these errors, why he thought it was going to be another
Yeah.
Venezuela. That's what I think we should talk about.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah.
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 But I also saw, I mean, personally, I saw a lot of your fans were saying that you were thinking about uh, stepping back. I saw you posted something on Substack. Has it been overwhelming? So you've had a major rise, I think, obviously because you got so much of this right. But personally, how are things for you? I was gonna reach out and email you, but I didn't. Maybe I should have.
Right. Yeah. So March was really hard because when the war started February 28th, I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks because I was so anxious and afraid. I have three kids. I'm just worried about the world that they will inherit. And I was just following the news for 2 weeks straight, and my mind was like a beehive. And there were also some attacks against me. There was clearly a smear campaign that was coordinated because certain influencers were using the same talking points and using the same. Um, it seemed as though they got the same memo basically, but I really didn't mind that. I was more concerned about like where this war might go and where this might lead. It was making me very anxious. And and then a lot of people reached out. And I was overwhelmed with media requests, and I had to turn a lot down just because I had just so many commitments. I wanted to like maintain teaching my class, and I reached a point where I actually don't want to do this. I don't want to be the center of a storm. I don't want to be the center of attention. Like what I specialize in is doing deep analysis, and trying to tie current events to historical patterns and try to offer some insight and clarity as to how the future might reveal itself. And that's something I've been doing for the past 2 years. It's something I really enjoy doing. And in the beginning, when I only had like 20,000 fans, it was really rewarding. It was very edifying. Everyone was really happy to have found me. It seemed as though it was a really small club, and everyone enjoyed being in it. But then, as you know, this past year, I became more and more prominent. And then in March, I just sort of blew up everywhere. And that put me in the eye of, of the storm. And, and I asked myself, the question I asked myself is, am I capable of still doing insightful analysis while being a celebrity of some sorts? And if the answer is no, then I should stop being a celebrity and continue doing research and teaching because that's my value to the world. That's what I should focus on. And so I was seriously considering just not doing YouTube and taking some time off and just trying to clear my head and trying to get some perspective on what's going on because I don't want to be influenced by this attention. I don't want um, to be a player in this game, right? But as things moved on, I recognized that the internet it has no attention span. And eventually people just shift focus, and I was able to manage my schedule more properly. My plan now is I want to continue teaching until the end of the semester when my contract runs out. And then I want to do more traveling to see more of the world and hopefully do some lectures because I talk a lot about geopolitics, but I think it's very important to experience the world. So I've been invited back to a conference in Moscow in late June, and I'm really excited about that because I've never been to Russia, even though I talk a lot about Russia. I would love to visit Japan at some point because I've never actually visited Japan. I would like to go to Europe, and I would like to go back to the United States, visit South America. So I really think it's important for me to do more deep dive research, and I want to continue to do my YouTube because I built a very strong following, and they really enjoy learning from me. I want to continue doing my Substack. At some point, I want to switch gears and write a book to really systemize game theory in a way that allows people to start thinking in terms of game theory themselves. And yeah, so right now, I was in mid-March, pretty anxious, pretty depressed with the state of affairs. And I felt that for my mental health and for the sake of my family, I should take some time off. But fortunately, I've been able to manage a lot of stress more effectively. And so I like to continue doing what I'm doing, but at a much more manageable schedule. So basically cut back on media requests, podcast interviews, and maybe scale down the teaching. Before I was uploading like 3 lectures a week, and that was pretty unsustainable. So maybe in the future I'll move towards 1 or 2 lectures a week. So continue to update my community, continue to educate my community, but making sure that it's long-term sustainable.
I'm happy to hear that. I was worried. And I think I didn't reach out because I'm like, okay, you have it figured out. I'm sure you saw the attacks and you knew. But yeah, we still want the lectures 3 a week. That's a lot.
Right.
Since the war ramped
Yeah,
up,
it
you've
is.
been uploading a lot. And I was really surprised at how much you were able to do because it's recorded. They average about an hour long, an hour lecture. So it must be a lot of
Yeah.
preparation, a lot of notes, and you do it in one take, no cuts. And when I saw that your mic cut off because, you're probably all over the place, I was worried you were gonna quit, but that's good to hear. Does it feel like you've been at the start of this war in an ideological war or a spiritual war?
Yeah, I mean, I feel as though there's so much temptation to take advantage of my celebrity, right? So a lot of people have reached out and said, they want me to invite me to do a lecture. People have invited me to do a podcast and they'll pay for my media appearance. Um, there are a lot of people in China who've reached out and they want to make me famous in China, basically. I'm not famous in China. I'm actually more famous. It's
In
really strange,
America?
but I'm actually more famous in the United States than I'm in China. I purposely keep a low profile. So I think my priority is I can't get distracted by any of this. I've been very clear for the longest time, these past few years, what my mission is. My mission is to raise my children and to be good people and to be a good role model to them. My mission is to educate people to the best of my ability. If you want to get educated, I want to provide the best education to you possible. And my mission is to constantly learn about the world, to constantly maintain my curiosity, maintain my objectivity, and try to provide enlightenment to humanity. Okay, so those are my three major missions. And this is something that I set out for myself a long time ago when I started to have children. And I want to maintain my mission. So, I mean, I'm getting millions of views on YouTube, and I mean, I could easily monetize it and retire a millionaire in a few years, right? But I don't want to do that. I want to keep myself lean and hungry. I want to provide restraints on myself. I don't want to make life easy for myself. I mean, like I want to maintain a very disciplined, rigorous lifestyle where I'm forcing myself to be the best I can be. So, but at the same time, it's always like, well, I mean, you have three kids and you get famous in China, then they can go to the best schools. Everyone will be nice to them, and they have nothing to worry about for the rest of their lives. And honestly, if I were younger, if I'm in my 20s and 30s, I would easily give in to all this temptation. But I've reached a point in my life where I don't actually care anymore. I don't care about the wealth or the status or the power or the fame. I just know who I am and I know what I want to do. And I'm very focused on achieving my mission. So yeah, there is temptation. It is a spiritual war, but I feel as though I'm very fortunate in that I've reached an age where I can handle all the temptation pretty well. And I've reached an age where I have the maturity and the perspective and experience to know what matters and what is right.
I mean, you got it right. All the media appearances that you've been on, you were on the Tucker Show, you were on Piers Morgan, and on the last appearance you had on my stream, you mentioned how you thought the Patrick Bet David show was going to be a setup. You got it spot on. They recently posted a podcast and a video where they were criticizing and they were saying that you were a fraud because of that clip. Obviously, well, that was showed that you predicted that attack just like you predicted the attacks on Iran. So were you?
Wait, so I will be on his show tomorrow. I've agreed
Wow.
to go on his show because I feel it's important to engage different perspectives.
Yeah.
So I was on the Mehdi Hassan show, and he spent an hour. Sorry, he spent half an hour with me. I think 10 minutes of it was he was just lobbing criticisms, accusations against me, and it was not a pleasant experience. I mean, he's very aggressive
Yeah.
and he's
Yes.
very provocative. But I felt that for my audience, it was good to see me in this sort of situation. It's good that I'm not in a bubble and that I'm willing to hear different perspectives. And so I think it's important for me to confront my critics and to provide my side of the story. We talked about this last time, but I think the most important thing is to be open-minded and to engage people in good faith debate. Some people may not have good faith, but I think it's very important to set the principle of it's really important to engage in debate just for your own self-learning.
Remember last time we spoke, you were saying that a lot of these debates or loud panels could be a waste of time, and it's better to sit down with somebody you disagree with and have a contentious conversation. But how do you differentiate those loud debates between an exchange of ideas?
Right. So I mean, I think a very quick litmus test is how long is it going to be? If it's 10 minutes, they're looking for sound bites. Because I've been on TV before and I know what TV is like. They're looking for, the gotcha moment. But so David, Patrick Bet David, to his credit, has given me 2 hours. So it'll be a 2 hour conversation. And so I think I have enough time to elaborate on certain points that I was not able to elaborate on, say, maybe Piers Morgan, because that was 15 minutes, right? And the other thing is how many people are in this debate, right? So if you go on Piers Morgan, the panel, there's like three or four people. They're all shouting over one another, and I don't really enjoy that sort of thing. But I think with Patrick Bet David, it'll be me and his people.
I
So
would
there are
love
no
to
other
see that.
deaths.
I mean, they have been pushing the war quite a bit. I saw recently, I don't know if Patrick was on it, but they had several of the other co hosts. They were essentially saying that they want to keep on escalating this conflict, which you've spelled out in your lectures it's just going to be a disaster. I like what Joe Kent said. He said that they should retreat and they should try to negotiate and work with Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. There's no other opportunity. It seems like they're getting closer to a ground troop invasion. So if they keep making this mistake and listening to people like, I don't know if you know Loomer, she's saying that she wants the United States to bomb all the mosques in Iran. I'm not even exaggerating, to bomb their power plants. It seems like that was just hit, and Iran's refusing to negotiate at all because they hit the power plants. And a lot of this is straight up war crime. It doesn't even seem like war crime has a real meaning anymore because they are not going to face pressure from the Geneva Convention, from the United Nations. They just get away with it.
Yeah, no, I think Joe Cannon is absolutely right. If the United States were to just stop this war and retreat, Iran would be perfectly happy to go to the negotiating table. Because what people forget is that there are different factions within Iran as well. There are many factions who don't want this war to continue because obviously this would be devastating for the civilians. And it's going to take years and years to build back a lot of the infrastructure. So if the United States were to retreat today and close their Middle East bases, Iran would be perfectly happy to negotiate a deal with the United States where both would be responsible for the Strait of Hormuz, and they would share tolls and tariffs. I guarantee you, if the United States were to say to Iran, we're leaving, let's make a deal that benefits both of us, Iran would be like, absolutely. And you know what? Iran would be like, you know what, if you want to come and invest in our country, and if you want us to join the USD system, if you want us to buy US treasuries, we'd be happy to do so. Just strike a deal like China did with China in the 90s, right? Where China was given most favored nation trading status. You had tons of American investment and expertise flowing into the country. In return, China started to buy a lot of US treasuries. Iran would be more than happy to make this deal. They'd be ecstatic about making this deal. So the big question is, why not make this deal? It's mutually beneficial. It's win-win. It would bring peace to the world.
The art of the deal. But
the art of the deal, yes.
We know,
yes.
I mean, look, if you watch predictive history, you could see that that's not going to happen. This is the effect of hubris.
No, it's going to happen.
I mean, just look what Trump's saying. I mean, this morning, that's what he should do. That's obviously the only outcome. It's going to be a disaster. He is completely losing his mind. I don't know if you think that he has some cognitive issues going on. It seems like a senile old person. It's a straight up disaster. And since the last time I spoke to you, Pam Bondi has now been fired. They're saying that she's going to be repositioned in the private sector. She's no longer Attorney General. Hegseth was questioned and pressed for firing 8 top generals within the military. It seems like, although, I mean, they've been declaring victory for 4 weeks. I don't know what type of victorious war this is if nothing was accomplished besides killing civilians. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Our economy is up. Oil's up. Everything that you have laid out in your lectures has come true. And this is probably going to keep being the disaster that it is. In your last, in the Pax Judaica Rising lecture, you were talking about how this is probably going to be the decline of an American empire. Do you still hold that position?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think this is the end of American empire. The thing about war that people don't appreciate, because it's been a long time since we fought a real war, is that war makes people crazy, right? It's like if you're in a fight, and maybe you didn't mean to get in the fight, and maybe in the beginning, the fight was over the pettiest things, and the observers think, oh well, they just argue and push each other and then punch each other, but then this thing will stop. But once you get in a fight, the adrenaline takes over, right? And you just want to win no matter what, and you can do anything to win. So what's happening is that the American military, maybe they were not in for this war, but now that they're in this war, they want to win this war at all costs. And you look at a guy like Peter Hegseth. Whenever he does a press conference, I swear to God, it's almost like like he talks war in a as though he's having an orgasm. I mean, do you get that impression where like he just loves this, right? When
Yeah.
he says like negotiating with bombs, it's like he's climaxing.
Yeah.
Like
It's sick.
it's these people are insane.
Yeah.
And I think that's what war does to people. You know, you go to World War One, where, you know, for years they were throwing millions of people to their deaths in the trenches. They were ordering millions of men to go run into machine gun fire. And then you're like, why would they do that? That's irrational. But you have to understand, war makes people crazy. So as this thing progresses, you're going to see more craziness, more madness on the part of Trump and Hegseth. I mean, Hegseth loves this thing, and then Trump doesn't want to lose face, right? He fears. I mean, the thing he fears most is humiliation, being called a clown, being called incompetent. He's a very insecure man. So I think that they're definitely going to bomb power plants, and they are going to definitely bomb desalination plants, and they're definitely going to send in ground troops. This thing will just escalate and escalate. And the problem is that as this becomes much more crazy, as this becomes much more mad, the American people will become much more desensitized to this madness. And eventually things will become much more normalized until America finds itself in total war. And that's the real fear.
We already are desensitized. So that the war never happens on our soil. We are so
Yeah.
far away from these conflicts. The vast majority of people I did an interview or I talked to people in the subway station, most of them, they are following the idea of ignorance is bliss. They're just like, I don't want to read about it. And it's just
Yeah.
in comparison, you think about the people in Iran, they don't get to think that way. It's not like, I'm just going to
Yeah.
turn my brain off to it because it hurts my feelings. They have to think about it because it's life. But for us, the great tragedy is information. So it's the desensitization that you could see in America. It stretched to Gaza and around the world. Americans getting more upset about Harambe than they are about this conflict. And I have been extremely alarmed that we are so desensitized. What I'm also realizing is you're talking about the insanity of it, and Hegseth saying that we negotiate with bombs. He is treating it like it's a video game. He talks about it, and
Yeah.
even their marketing of this war is like an 80s action movie, like it's Rambo
Yeah.
or Scarface. They're posting golf edits,
Yeah.
and it turns into a bomb. They really do believe that this is playing a video game in a way. I don't think that they view it as human life at all. If you look at the drone footage that they're posting, it's as if they're using an Xbox controller. I think a lot of people have seen, well, because it's Easter, that the evangelical sect, which doesn't represent all Catholics and all Christians, all Orthodox, specific to the evangelical Christians, Paula White, Trump's spiritual advisor, what she's doing, blowing into the microphone and getting people to do exorcisms, the fact that they're trying to pray for this war and turning Trump into an idol. Trump is using, Messiah-like rhetoric. What is the truth about evangelical Christians? How are they so not all of them, but they are using some really insane rhetoric?
Well, two years ago when I was posting my lectures to YouTube, I said there'll be three major reasons for a U.S. invasion of Iran. And the three reasons were, number one, Christian Zionism, the evangelicals in America. Second was Saudi Arabia. And the third is hubris, empire, right? So for me, Israel is not a factor, a larger factor as people assume it to be. I think the Christian Zionists are a much larger problem.
I agree.
And so for them, this war in the Middle East is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, meaning that this will eventually culminate with the second coming and the return of Jesus and the rapture. And so if they can provoke events in a certain way, then it will cause a domino effect, a chain reaction, which will lead to the end of the world, right? And so the certain conditions that they have to meet is One is a war in the Middle East, which is happening right now. Second is the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the building of the Third Temple. This will happen, I think, within the next 2 years. It will happen very, very soon. And I think it's going to shock people. If you don't believe that this war is eschatological or religious in any way, when the Al-Aqsa Mosque is destroyed, I guarantee you will start to believe this is a religious war. Um, Anti-Semitism is actually a very important part of the puzzle as well because they need the Jewish diaspora to return to Israel. And then you have the Jewish Messiah, the coming of the Jewish Messiah. And then you have the war of Gog and Magog. Okay, so you have these. You need to have these different elements in place. So it seems as though there's a script in place, and there are fundamentalists, just crazy religious extremists on and they occupy different countries, right? So you have these Zionists in Israel, but then you have the Christian Zionists in America, and they're all working towards the same goal. And I don't think people, especially young people, appreciate the appeal of this eschatology. It's almost like a drug, because it's a way to structure your life and give it meaning and purpose, right? You're just trying to achieve one goal, and it's a script. So all you have to do is play your part. Speak one or two lines in the script, and the script will move automatically, naturally, almost divinely, towards the end of the world and the coming return and the return of Jesus. And people don't appreciate how powerful this movement is, because if you look at the stats, okay, about a quarter, 1/4 of Americans are evangelicals. Okay, most are not Christian Zionists, so maybe about 10% are Christian Zionists. But then you're talking about, like, at least in America, 10 to 20, 30 million people who are Christian Zionists. Okay, that's a lot of people, because remember, not only do they believe this stuff, but they're actively contributing and acting towards achieving this vision, which means that they're donating money to this cause. So there's a pastor named John Hagee, Hagee, and he runs an organization called Christians United for Israel. It's about 7 million people. They have 7 million people in this group. And what they specialize in is raising funds to fund West Bank settlement. Okay, so these are the people driving a lot of the conflict in the Middle East, because they want the Jews to return to Israel, which would initiate a chain of events that would lead to the return of Jesus. So they do fundraising, but also they will also work for the government. They'll lobby politicians. If you speak out against Israel, these people will call you up every single day and batter you, and they'll go to the office and protest you. Okay, so these people, they may not have that much money, but they certainly are willing to work their ass off in order to achieve their vision, and they're united, and they have the same purpose. And then you combine this with AIPAC money, right? The AIPAC people and all these Jewish Zionist billionaire money, and they become like an unstoppable political force in America.
Mm-hmm. Since we last spoke, Al-Aqsa Mosque was closed for Eid prayer.
Yep.
I think it was the first time since 1967.
Yep.
It's also been closed for 35 days. And I was leaving Saudi. Originally, I had to cancel it because of the war. I was going to go to Medina with a big group for Ramadan, had to be canceled, but I ended up going anyway. And on the way back, I was in the Istanbul airport. It's a huge international airport. I saw this giant screen playing the news, and it showed that they were reporting Israel's reporting that Iran's debris from missiles was fired near Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. So that seems like that's the playbook. The division that you see between the Persians and Arabs, it seems like there is some Sunni Shia conflict. They're probably going to try to pin it similar to, if you could make a comparison to 9/11, we'll probably try to pin it on Iran and say that they are the ones responsible for bombing Al-Aqsa Mosque, even though it's a holy site for Sunni and Shias. It's the third holy city, Jerusalem, and Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third most important mosque in the world. Why was it closed? Some people are speculating that it could be because Mossad's planting bombs there. Is there a specific reason?
Look, so you just look at what's been happening these past few years, and it's pretty clear what the playbook is, okay? So many years ago, this Texas farmer, he bred perfect red heifers, right? And it cost him millions of dollars to uh, breed perfect red heifers, and you need them as a sacrifice to consecrate the grounds for the building of the third temple. And then he flew them to Israel, and so now they're all in Israel. They're all perfect. They're all ready to be sacrificed when the time is appropriate. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that there's organization in Israel called the Temple Institute. The Temple Institute, they have a website. And what they've done is they have already built brick by brick the third temple. Okay, so the third temple is already built, and all they have to do is move it into position when the Dome of the Rock is destroyed, because the Dome of the Rock is where the third temple has to be. Um, that's number two. Number three is for the past few years, they've been conducting archaeological digs under the Al-Aqsa complex. Now, why would you do that? And the answer is, well, because you plan to plant bombs to do a controlled demolition. Last June, there was a prominent Israeli rabbi who told his followers, "Oh my God, this 12-day war, it was a perfect opportunity to do a false flag, where we pretend an Iranian missile hits the Al-Aqsa Mosque, we blow it up in a controlled demolition, and then the Persians and the Arabs, because they're animals, start killing each other, and then we have peace in the Middle East." Right? So it seems as though all the ingredients are in place, all the elements are in place. And what I think they're waiting for is this. What I think they're waiting for is global economic collapse. And this could happen in the next 6 months, right? When East Asia is completely out of oil, and you have total lockdowns like COVID, where in Africa people are starving because they don't have fertilizer anymore. In the United States, people are rioting because of inflation, because of the national draft, whatever. But when the entire world is chaos, no one's going to notice the Al-Aqsa Mosque has been destroyed, right? And I think they're waiting for that. They're very patient. They're very methodical. I think we will see this happen, all this play out in the next year or two.
Have you noticed a shift in the strategy to prevent disinformation from spreading? Because any sort of basic analysis, and you can understand what the objective is. Before, several years ago, this sort of information would have been censored everywhere. I noticed now
Yeah.
that I spoke to an American soldier on stream, and I was telling him about the war, what's really happening. He's like, I just want to defend my country. Well, Rubio said that they did not pose a threat, and they preemptively attacked Israel to prevent an attack. They were defending themselves by striking first. And he started saying that, okay, well, I want to protect God's chosen people. I'm a Christian. And I'm telling him, okay, well, there's the similarities between Muslims and Christians. We both believe Jesus is the Messiah. Most Israel, well, not all, not most, but many believe that Jesus is burning in hell. Why would you die for these people? Even when you tell people this, they still believe in their programming. Is this the new strategy? Have they realized that they won the propaganda war, so they don't need to censor?
So I think that what's happening now is very different from what happened during COVID, right? Because remember, in the first few weeks of COVID, there was huge suspicion that this was a lab leak. And there were a lot of criticisms that these lockdowns won't work and we shouldn't trust the vaccines. And there's a massive campaign to censor anyone and everyone who raised any questions about COVID.
That's why I was banned on
And
YouTube for that reason.
right, right. And today we're seeing the complete opposite, where very prominent influencers, such as yourself, such as Tucker Carlson, are given huge microphones and are allowed to say whatever they want against this war. You have a lot of Americans who are now rooting for Iran because they understand how unjust this war is. I'm being amplified throughout social media. I don't think it's organic. I think like I'm being amplified and given more prominence than I should be. And so the question is, why is this happening? And one suspicion I have is that this sort of social dissent, this social division, is also part of the playbook. Because if this war is meant to move towards the end of the world and the Great Reset, then you need civil war throughout the Western world, right? You need civil war in America, you need civil war in Europe. And what better way to foment civil war than have people argue all the time on social media? What better way than to show people that this war is pointless, it's unwinnable, and just sow apathy and discontent in the American mind. So, I don't know if this is true, but I think that if we just assume that this war is eschatological, and there are many powerful people who benefit from the Great Reset, then civil war is part of the script.
I've been trying to advocate for unity as much as I possibly can. And I'm sure you felt it. And I think it's part of the coordinated attack on you. So many people that should ally with you and understand what you're talking about, I'm seeing them lash out at you so angrily. And it's confusing. Also, with the rise of these AI accounts on X, and half of the replies on my Twitter, it's just straight up people talking about my faith and my race and it's like they have notifications on. You click on the profile, it doesn't even look real, and it is demoralizing. I think that they shifted from censorship to demoralization because it's draining. That's why I asked you about spiritual warfare, because that will really, and it's probably why you felt like you were having a mental health problem in March, because all of that is not normal for one human to process.
Yes. Yeah, no, listen, there are certain individuals that before I highly respected, and I thought that they would be on my side completely. So one person that comes to mind is David Icke. I'm not sure if you come across his work.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
And like I've said very nice things about David Icke in the past. I think he's been very courageous in trying to promote his ideas, even though I don't really agree with some of his ideas. I agree with most of his ideas, but I disagree with some aspects of his ideas. But that's just normal, right? Two intelligent person, they might be sympathetic towards each other. They might have a similar viewpoint, but they have some disagreements on certain issues. And he's been vindicated so many times, right? Because he was really one of the first to promote the idea that the elite are this transnational cabal of pedophiles, right? And he's been proven right so many times. And when I blew up, he was one of the first to attack me, saying that I'm basically a useful idiot. I'm like working for the global cult to sow discontent and sow confusion among the people. And he's been consistent about it. And it's been really surprising for me because, again, we will agree, David Icke and I, if we were to sit down, we would agree on like 9% of everything. And we might disagree on, is there really a global cult? Are there really interdimensional lizard people? I mean, we might disagree on certain aspects, but on the most part, like the general trend, how the world works, we would get along very, very well. And he's been very hostile towards me, and he's been very hostile towards Tucker Carlson for whatever reason, because Tucker Carlson has been the most consistent anti-war voice in America for the past 5-6 years. And so it's very strange. I find Patrick Bet-David also very strange, because 5 years ago or 4 years ago during COVID, like I would have loved to be on the show, and we would have like shown how COVID was clearly a lab leak, clearly it was a bioweapon, clearly these lockdowns were authoritarian measures, clearly you shouldn't take the vaccine. We would have agreed on DEI, we would have agreed on woke politics, we would have agreed on a lot of issues, and before I was watching a lot. And then this Israel thing happens, and for whatever reason, he's very pro-Israel, pro-war, and he attacks me. And so I just find this really weird.
I've seen it outside of geopolitics. I saw David Icke. That one was confusing. He has been critical of Alex Jones, and I could see how that makes sense because Alex Jones was probably one of the most important Trump influencers. But I like that he's saying the right things now. So I was very
Yep.
skeptical of Alex for a while, but I like that he's changed his opinion, and I think he's saying the right things now. But David Icke, that one is really. I was gonna bring him on. I invited him to come on the stream. I was gonna ask him about that because it doesn't make sense. But outside of politics, I've seen it with faith too. I think a lot of people. I don't think it's paid. I really think this is the product of social media and their new strategy, because people are attacking their own group. I'm seeing a lot of Muslims turn against each other. You know, people, oh, okay, I live in Dubai, you're supporting Iran. And then you have so much infighting. People, you know, especially within the Islamic world, usually the Muslims are some of the most united people. And, you know, small disagreements people are hyper fixating on and arguing with each other. And I'm telling them and reaching out to them, this is such a minor thing that you should not be focusing your energy on. But I really think people are wrapped up in that new propaganda strategy of hatred.
You know, one thing that might be interesting is maybe you could set up a conversation between me and David Icke. You know, invite both of us on your stream and try to figure out what's going on. Because I see him as a teacher. You know, for the past few decades, he's gone out of his way to educate and enlighten the general public about how the world really works. I see myself in a similar vein. So I think we have a similar vision, we have a similar outlook, and I don't understand why we have disagreements. Because I mean, unlike Alex Jones, I'm not partisan, right? I never said, you know, vote for Trump and Trump's going to save the world. I mean, like what I said was Trump's going to start this stupid war that's going to destroy the American empire. So I mean, like, I don't see myself as partisan. I don't see myself as political. I see myself as a teacher who's trying to teach people how to think for themselves. And I think that's something that David Icke is doing as well. So I'm completely confused as to why he consistently attacks me. So I would love to have a conversation with
I'll
him
set that up.
if that's possible.
Invite is open. I think I'm happy to set that up with David. A lot of it too, I think you're right. The war makes people insane. And Hegseth has said, he said the way he's like, we're gonna pound him, we're gonna keep up Trump, like raising his eyebrows. But equally, I think a lot of people that have been speaking about this for a long time are becoming bitter, because it's like, okay, everything that I've been saying, I'm now vindicated about, right? There's been people that have been critical of Trump and of Israel, especially I think anti-Israel critics are now looking at what's happening. It's just, you know, then you get angry. There's a lot of jealousy in the air, like, oh, he has more followers. It's just made people lose that sense of humanity, you know, because now that you're seeing everything that was predicted spelled out in front of your eyes, what are you going to talk about on your show? You're just going to lash out to people within your circle. So, and you mentioned about Larry Fink and BlackRock, and I think you mentioned that in one of your most recent lectures. So Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, spelled out his new strategy as well. It's kind of similar. He's saying that he wants to invest money more on war propaganda, essentially, rather than pushing woke ideology. And the question he was posed was, wokeism is a failed project. So I think a lot of people, like the liberals, for example, are very critical of Trump, and they always protest the billionaire class. It is funny to see them maybe start to realize, if they see this interview, that so much of their ideology, you know, the blue hair and all these isms and all these genders, this was pushed specifically by the same ones that you protest. The Zionist billionaire who wants to keep you divided. Have they given up on pushing DEI and wokeism?
Yeah. So David Icke makes this point, and he's absolutely right in that wokeism was a direct response to Occupy Wall Street. Because remember, 2008, people were pissed because they found out that the financial industry were just a bunch of criminals who didn't know what they were doing, who were incompetent, who would control all the levels of power so they could bail themselves out while screwing over everyone else, right? So you start this huge movement called Occupy Wall Street that transcended all class divisions, all racial divisions. And it was a great movement. It was a great slogan, right? Against 1%. Like, you know, let's unite against 1%. And I think the powers that be were generally horrified by this. In fact, Hillary Clinton talked about this, how, you know, we can't have this happen where the people align against the banking interests, because quite honestly, this could be a very powerful political movement. So their strategy then was to promote DEI, to sow dissent and discord, and say like, no, what matters is that class, okay? That doesn't really matter. What matters is race. That's what matters, you know? And like we should focus on the fact that black, brown, woman, gay, were all historically persecuted, and that's what we should be concerned about. We should be concerned about addressing these historical grievances rather than about wealth redistribution, right? And so this was promoted throughout American society, especially in the universities, and it's been a disaster for America. And it was completely irrational. And the thing is that it worked, and it's made young people impossible to reason with.
Yeah.
Like, why are we concerned about racial issues when no one can actually afford a living wage? Should not be our concern. Let's not worry about things that divide us. Let's focus on things that unite us, which is our mutual hatred for the banking elite, for all these bankers that bankrupted America and then laughed about it, right? And they still got their huge bonuses at the end of the year. So and now what they've realized is that, well, DEI is a problem because it also leads to protests against the genocide in Gaza, right? So now we need to change tax and yeah.
Yeah, you're right. People, not just people on the left who fell for this BlackRock programming, but on the right wing too. I tweeted saying that the first racist was Satan. I don't know if you know the story of Satan. You definitely do. And he was rejecting the command to prostrate to Adam, and because he thought that he was, well, at first he was an angel, Angel Jibril, and because he thought he was superior, he refused, and then he ended up becoming Satan. So that is an act of superiority. That's the arrogance, that's pride, that's the same as racism. And so many people got really upset with that idea. I thought, there's a difference between making jokes about race and actually harboring racist ideology. And I'm surprised to hear that, because this is the problem with Israel. It's a superiority complex. Look at the Epstein files, the way he's speaking about the Goyim. It comes from this belief that you have something special within your DNA that makes you better than others. So to focus on what is really important now is crucial, but I think a lot of people are shifting. I don't know if you've noticed this, but many people who used to classify themselves as Democrat or Republican, as left or right or liberal, this stuff, I think people have realized slowly that a lot of this is preventing you from seeing the bigger picture, and it's really about right and wrong, not left and right.
Have you come across a woman named Robin DiAngelo?
I have not.
Do you know who she is? Okay. So Robin DiAngelo wrote a book called White Fragility. And what she promotes is the idea that all white people are born racist. And this racism is the source of all evil in the world. And what white people need to do is engage in a series of self-reflections, basically seminars where you pay her to come to you and teach you how to be anti-racist. And these seminars are expensive, man. Like just Google her. She is just loaded. And so she's organizing seminars where these white suburban women come and listen to her tell them how racist they are and how evil they are. And they just lap it up. They just love this. And the other thing that's really confusing is there's no Black person in these seminars. In fact, there's a strict prohibition against Black people participating in these seminars. Now, you would think that if you want to reduce your racism, you would engage people who are different from you to learn that they are just like you, like to learn empathy, right? But these seminars strictly demand that the races be kept separate from each other. Because apparently Blacks have historically been persecuted and victimized. So we can't put Blacks in a room of white, wealthy, suburban women who would persecute them even more. So we have to protect the Black people, like basically put them in a zoo, okay? It's important we put back black people in a zoo so that we can look at them and say, oh my God, how terrible these black people have to suffer under racism. Okay. But you can't touch them, you can't feed them. Okay. You can't interact with them. So this Robin DiAngelo is like the worst person in America. She gets rich by appealing to the idea of self-victimization. And she's a cult leader. DEI at the end of the day, okay? If you just like watch her speak, she is a cult leader, no different from people like L. Ron Hubbard. First of all, she's very charismatic. She's a great speaker. But if you just like look at her demeanors, if you look at her speech, if you just look at her logic, she's a cult leader.
Yeah, I was looking up her Wikipedia just now. I wanted to see, but it doesn't list in the early life what I was looking for. I made a mistake. It's not Angel Jibril, my mistake. It's Angel Iblis became Satan. People are getting upset.
Right.
So basically, this is all nonsense. White people aren't born inherently racist. This is a lot of these seminars too. You could saw it post George Floyd and BLM. White people had so much guilt over the protests going on that they would start to prostrate to black people and recreate slavery, and they would let black people whip them. But what do you think? Is there any validity in this? Well, where do you think white supremacy is important today? How is this an important issue to talk about today? And how does it relate at all to the supremacy we see in Israel?
Um, so America has always had an issue of racism because America is a melting pot, right? So if you go back to the 19th century, the late 19th century, the real concern was genetics because these Catholics were coming into the country, right? These Catholics from Poland, Ireland, Italy, and Catholics were having kids, and the Protestants were not having kids, and so this started the eugenics movement, like which led to Planned Parenthood. But the idea is that we need to maintain the integrity and the sanctity of the gene pool. So we need to basically neuter these immigrants and prevent them from having kids, while encouraging the Protestants, the Brahmins, to have more kids. And so this has been a concern going back to the late 19th century when immigration was starting to flood the country. And the Nazis used the American thinking, the American sterilization program, American eugenics program. They basically just copied everything from America, and so this has been a consistent issue. But what I'll also say is that I've been to a lot of countries in the world, and I would say that America is probably the least racist country in the world, because regardless of America's racist past, Americans have deep respect for hard work and for talent. America's the only country in the world where you can come as a nobody and work really hard, open a restaurant, and be a millionaire. And I know because my relatives have done so. And you couldn't do that in China. You couldn't do that in Europe. You couldn't do that anywhere else. So yeah, I understand that there is a racist past in America. There's a past of slavery. There's a past of genocide against the indigenous people. I understand that. But at the same time, we can't forget that America is still probably the most open and generous society in the world.
Do you think that there's any sort of validity in the confusion of racism when you look at Epstein? Because I'm wondering how so many people like Gates, like Trump, were they able to get along with somebody like Epstein and see him as a friend and see him as one and the same? But then you see rhetoric very recently from Trump where he's calling Somalis low IQ. Is this some sort of subversion? How do these wealthy, influential people who should be highly intelligent get so easily subverted by an Epstein?
So I think with Epstein, it's not racism, it's about bloodlines. So if you are part of that circle of people, like the top elite, okay, you're really concerned about bloodlines. And the reason why is that you need to explain in your mind why you have all this power, all this money. Because objectively, Bill Gates has like billions of dollars, right? So he's like 1,000 times wealthier than us, normal people. But he's like 1,000 times smarter? Probably not.
Mhm.
And so he sort of understands that, okay? So one thing that they're trying to look at is my bloodline different? Do I come from a race of the divine, right? Am I an ancestor of Hercules or Achilles, right? Because back in the Greek world, kings claim a divine bloodline where, their mother was raped by Zeus, or maybe their father was Hercules, a son of Zeus. So for the elite, bloodline is very, very important. And they're constantly proving that how they're descended from like the most powerful people, emperors, right? So if you look at Epstein's emails, one thing that he was very obsessed with is family heritage, where he was having a conversation with Arende de Rothschild, who was a member of the Rothschild family. And one thing that he told her is, look, there were three families that were very powerful in Europe, Jewish banking families. They were the Rothschilds, the Epsteins, and the Gutmans. And we built a shelter, and Hitler lived in the shelter for a long time. And he was obsessed with this heritage of his, proving to himself and to others that the Epsteins is one of the most powerful families in the world. They're part of the Illuminati. They're up there with the Rothschilds. So this is what the elite is just obsessed with, proving to themselves in the world that they're just divine, and that's why they rule. Because it's not because of their brilliance, it's not because of their ability, it's not because of their leadership skills. It's because they're divine. Their blood is just different from ours.
Hmm. And again, that's why you see Keir Starmer and Trump have something in common. Both of they have children that married into similar families, Kushner and then Keir Starmer again, who his wife is and who his children are. But then on the topic of racism, right now, Lebanon has been invaded illegally. And the reports are that there's 1 million displaced Lebanese people. It's escalating. Hezbollah has struck back quite a bit in the south of Lebanon, a lot of missiles. But when these churches are getting attacked and priests are getting attacked, you don't see anybody really talking about it in America. It is Easter Sunday today. Why do you think so many Americans turn a blind eye to attacks on Christians in Lebanon? Because they have an idea that Middle Eastern countries people are all Muslim. Lebanon has a very strong Christian population, but people here don't care.
Well, I mean, let's go back to the No Kings protests, which I think happened a couple weekends ago. But there's this
Yes.
huge protest, right? The No Kings.
Directed by
But the thing
Israeli
is that,
Zionists in DC, a billionaire family.
right, so you were allowed to protest No Kings, which I don't even know what that means, No Kings, because America doesn't have a king. But you are not allowed to protest the war in Iran. All right. If you were protesting the war in Iran, security would come and arrest you or take you away. So it's just the silliest thing where you have this global No Kings movement. You have no Kings movement in Canada, which is absurd because Canada does have a king. You have No Kings movement in Britain, which is absurd because Britain does have a king. And you have No Kings movement in America. And no one knew what what their platform was. No one knew what their agenda was. And so another question then is, in 2003, during the Iraq War, there were huge protests around the world against the war. There are no protests today. So you wonder how much of life today is organic.
Yeah.
How much of it is people actually expressing their views as opposed to they're being paid to protest or they're being paid to promote a certain viewpoint online. I think people don't appreciate the amount of brainwashing, indoctrination that goes on in social media, in daily life. And I think that COVID was crucial because COVID taught the elite not only that people can be programmed to be obedient, but also how to program them. So, COVID was this massive experiment in mass political indoctrination, and they're still using the same playbook today. And you're right. Why aren't we protesting this war in Iran? Why aren't we protesting what Israel is doing in Lebanon? Why aren't we protesting the fact that Israel seems to be targeting everyone? Why hasn't anyone protested the fact that America, at the first day of the war, killed the leader of Iran, which is against international law, and also killed 168 innocent schoolgirls? Why aren't there any protests against that? So all this is really weird.
I'm wondering, well, I want to ask you after, but I want to figure out what are these methods, because look back at 6 years ago, the George Floyd protests happened because they saw this video of George Floyd. Derek Chauvin was on putting a knee on his back or neck. And then the entire country quite literally lights up in flames. They're burning Target, they're burning police stations. Everybody's protesting amidst a quarantine where literally the day before people were wiping down their groceries and their Uber Eats orders with the Clorox wipe. The next day they see George Floyd and everybody goes outside, breaks the quarantine, and forgets about social distancing, forgets about being afraid. The social programming was so effective. And you're right, I think they did realize that. You would think, especially 6 years ago when that happened, that if you saw the release, or the partial release of the Epstein files, that there would be national uproar, and there's nothing. You would think that if there was a war in Iran, after bragging about no new wars, saying that we're not going to make the same mistakes, that there would be uprising all over the country. Maybe part of it is that it's majority youth that protests, like the Vietnam War. You see these college protests. The college students that were protesting against the genocide in Gaza, a lot of them, they got their student visas revoked or they'd be punished by the university. But outside of that, how do you think that they're able to manipulate and put the population under mass psychosis? Because Trump even just bragged about, I think yesterday, the day before, that he was the one arming the protesters in Iran for the 40,000 innocent civilians they keep talking about. First, it was 30,000. Then Trump in this speech last week says it was 45,000 protesters. I'm seeing some people say it was 90,000 now. But then he says essentially what Mike Pompeo said the day it happened, that CIA was arming these protesters to create mass chaos. How is this so effective? How can almost 8 billion people be controlled by such a small few?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a theory, okay? So my theory is that the people who are doing this are not the elite. The people who are doing this, engaging social control, are the liberal intellectual class, okay? So let me explain. So in the 1950s, there's a very popular book called The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills. And he's trying to explain how American power works. And he makes this argument, which is like the people at the very top, okay, the people who are at the very top of industry, finance, politics, they don't really care. They're just indifferent. The people who really care are the 10%, not the 1%, but the 10%. The 10% are journalists, are teachers, are professors, are doctors. They are the intellectual class who control public opinion, who control the public narrative. And on one hand, they think they are the powers that be because they are the influencers. They are the curators of public opinion. But on the other hand, they know all their power comes from their association with the power elite. Okay, so on one hand, they are the ones that so on one hand they believe that they have all the power, but on the other hand, in their heart, instinctively, they understand that their power comes from loyalty to the real powers that be, the generals, the financiers, the banking interests, the politicians. Okay, so for the longest time, as America was very wealthy, there was an agreement between the power elite and the intellectual class, and that the intellectual class would be the check and balance on the power elite so that they could balance each other out and create a fair and open democratic society, right? And so, for example, during the Vietnam War, when the power elite was engaging in this suicidal war of extermination in Vietnam, the power elite was still allowed the intellectuals to protest. This is what led to the Pentagon Papers and the publication of the Pentagon Papers in Washington Post and New York Times. That's what forced the war to come to an end, okay? And Walter Cronkite on CBS News also opposed this war, and that's what led to eventually the turning of public opinion. So there's this balance, right? And for C. Wright Mills, that's how America works at the very top. You have the 1% with all the money, power, but then you have the 10% which supports the system, but which also balances the system to make it more democratic. Then the problem, though, is 2016, Donald Trump won. And now the intellectual class have fear and anxiety because they see Donald Trump as representing a populist revolution. And if there's something that the intellectual class really hate, it's when the people become uppity, when they refuse to listen to mainstream news, when they read the New York Times and say, this is BS, man, when their high school teacher no longer has authority over them. They see Donald Trump as the existential threat to their way of life. And that's why they all rallied against him, right? And that's why you had TDS. TDS is not like people have become deranged about Donald Trump and they became irrational. It's more like they understand that Donald Trump represents a populist revolution. And Donald Trump, if his revolution were to succeed, then they would lose their way of life because their bosses, the power elite, would lose their power, okay? And then you had COVID happen, which destroyed a lot of the economy. And the intellectual class benefited from COVID because, well, they could just sit at home and do nothing all day, while the workers had to, what they call essential workers, right? They still had to do their job. So it taught the intellectual class that, okay, it's great to be an intellectual because you don't really have to do any work, but at the same time, it's also precarious. It's also unstable because now because of COVID, people recognize that if you just stay at home all day and do your work, your work is probably worthless, okay? I'm sorry to say this. But if you are a professor and you can just sit at home and lecture to your students and your students only even have to pay attention to you, then why do we need colleges, okay? And now you have AI. And the AI revolution, it's not about replacing blue-collar workers. You can't do that. It's about replacing white-collar workers, the lawyers, the accountants, the doctors, the professors, the high school teachers, right? So now you have this entire intellectual class that knows that there's this populist revolution rising. They know that AI can replace them, and they know that people know that they're worthless. So what do? They coalesce together, and they try their very best to control public opinion because that's the only value, right? If they are not able to control public opinion, then they are absolutely worthless, and they're discarded by AI, they're discarded by the power elite, and they're just sacrificed, right? So that's why they're working overtime to try to control the public discourse as much as possible. That's why you have the promotion of DEI, transgenderism throughout schools, because that's a way to brainwash kids into obedience. Okay, so that's my theory.
We're seeing it spelled out now. The MAGA cult, which is similar to Robin DiAngelo, who you just referenced with racism. The Trump supporters now, they were all anti-war last year. They were all saying that if another Middle Eastern conflict happened, they wouldn't support. They said the worst thing that could possibly happen for the American empire would be a ground troop invasion. Then they all adjust. The same exact people that were against this have now found new justifications because they put their loyalty completely into this ideology. And I really can't understand how it happens if a lot of these people are paid, but some of them just want to die on this hill, perhaps. I can't figure it out, but they are willing to sacrifice everything they believe in to support this cause. And there's a quote from Trump where he says almost word for word that smart people hate me. Smart people don't, the intellectual class, the ones that understand what he's doing And that's why Trump campaigns and why he's so successful in what they call the Bible Belt, where he can convince people in rural towns that he's one of them. So many of the working class Americans, the truck drivers, they are convinced that Trump is like them. Even though he's literally sitting in what looks like a gold throne, one of the first presidents to not even be in DC, living in Mar-a-Lago, this palace with these, these eyes wide shut like parties. I don't know if if it goes deeper. Maybe there's some sort of literal hypnosis going on, but it really is crazy to witness firsthand.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a story, right? So in 1992, there was this election contest between George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. And everyone just assumed H.W. Bush would win it easily because, first of all, it's very hard to unseat an incumbent president. Second of all, Bush had just won this very popular Persian Gulf War. His popular ratings were sky high. Okay. And then what happened was that, first of all, Ross Perot came into the race, which sort of split off the conservative vote. The other thing is that during one of these debates between Bill Clinton, Ross Perot, and George Bush, during the debate, he looked at his watch. And this was captured live on national TV. You're in a debate, deciding the fate of the country, and like, I can't be bothered. I have to go somewhere, okay? And that's what probably lost him the race. And people just thought that this was just the worst politician in the world. But people don't remember something really important about that election, which is that Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush go way back. They were very good friends. In fact, George H.W. Bush saw Bill Clinton as a protege. They met during Iran-Contra because George H.W. Bush was basically the de facto leader of Iran-Contra. He was the one controlling this deal. And then Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas at that time. And Arkansas was a really important hub for Iran-Contra. So they go way back. And then you're like, okay, but why would George H.W. Bush purposefully lose the election to Bill Clinton? And the reason why is this. At this time in history, George H.W. Bush was trying to promote NAFTA. He was trying to promote free trade with China. And people forget this, but the Democrats were a working class party, dead set against NAFTA, dead set against trade with China because of China's human rights record. And Bill Clinton, during the campaigned as a populist, promising that he would not allow most favored nation trading status with China, promising he won't do NAFTA. And then he gets elected. And he does the complete opposite. And he destroys the Democratic Party from within. Under Bill Clinton, his 8 years, the Democratic Party shifts from a party of the working class to the party of the coastal professional elite, which is still today. Okay, so that's how politics work, right? So there's no way George H.W. Bush could have promoted all these neoliberal reforms, but Bill Clinton could, right? So going back to today, where there's no way Joe Biden could have launched a war against Iran, because the MAGA people would have gone up in arms, right? You would have like riots in the streets, right? But Donald Trump can, okay?
I'm wondering, not to harp on this forever, but it's so confusing. From your perspective, growing up you mostly grew up in China, correct? Not in Canada?
No, I actually grew up in Canada.
Okay.
So I was 6 when I went over to Canada, and that's where I grew up. And then I went to Yale for about 4 years. Then I came to China. So I've been here since '99, since graduating from Yale.
Yeah, I was just wondering what your perspective on how that works is, because to me, it's so plainly obvious. The criticism they have for somebody like Mamdani, for example, I live in New York City, they are criticizing him for the way he eats. If he's eating during an interview, or if he's picking up food with his hand the same way people eat pizza. But the stuff that Trump gets away with, if I'm imagining Kamala Harris, for example, launched a ground troop invasion or was tweeting the things that Trump is tweeting, there would be mass outrage. I'm wondering what the key factor is. What is that? Is it a race thing, what makes people let Trump get away with what he's getting away with? What's the most important aspect of his rhetoric or the way he presents himself?
I think it's just the fact that he's so unpredictable. The fact that like every single day he's changing his mind. There was a press conference where like every sentence was a contradiction, right? He's like, "We won the war. Oh, we lost. We're not winning the war, but we'll win it. Oh, we can't win the war." He just kept on going on and on and on. And so when you become like that, when you are unpredictable, people were able to project their fantasies onto you, right? So for the MAGA people, Donald Trump is playing a 5D chess game, which is like his real goal is not to win the war in Iran. His real goal is to destroy the deep state with this war. Donald Trump, if he is to, basically free America of transnational capital, if he's to liberate America from the deep state, who've been in power since the 1963 assassination of JFK, he needs this war to basically consolidate power, right? This war, the deep state wants this war because they want to maintain the American empire, but Donald Trump wants to use this war to become a monarch, which is necessary in order for America to return to its democratic roots. So for them, it's this 5D chess.
Mm-hmm. And he is flirting with the idea of running for a third term. JD Vance, they're trying to separate. Okay, so he's going to, can you explain how is that going to work? Is it because it's wartime?
Look, I think Donald Trump has been very clear about this. He is going to get a third term. And the reason why is that if he ever steps out of office and the Democrats come to power, the first and only thing that Democrats are going to do is persecute this guy to death, okay? Yeah. I mean, think about what happened to him like when he left office in 2020, right? There was a FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago because he had some classified documents that everyone in Washington has, right? So everything in Washington, D.C. is classified. And like they didn't prosecute Hillary Clinton for having a private email server, which is against, law. They didn't prosecute Joe Biden for having classified documents in his garage in Delaware. So clearly this was a political persecution, right? So you had that FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago. You have lawfare, where 6 attorney generals were trying to prosecute Donald Trump. You had these lawsuits that were trying to bankrupt Donald Trump. So like if Donald Trump were ever to leave office, the Democrats would just make his life a living hell. They would not just go after him, but they would go after his immediate family, right? Because remember, Don Jr. is involved in a lot of cryptocurrency shenanigans. There's been a lot of insider trading in the Trump White House this past year, and it's all very blatant. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this is all insider trading. So there are a lot of court cases that they can file against Donald Trump. And Donald Trump understands this. He understands. Look. I'm doing all this. I know that if I leave office, I'll be prosecuted by the Democrats. So I won't leave office. It's that simple. Okay. And a lot of pieces are already in place for his third term. So, for example, he's turning ICE into his basically private secret police, his private police force, and he's expanding their powers. He's talked about deploying National Guard throughout the country. He might use this war to suspend the Constitution. There might be a false flag attack. In 2028, he could technically run as a vice president and have his son, Don Jr., as the presidential nominee. Believe it or not, but there's nothing in the Constitution that prevents you from doing this. It's immoral, but it's not illegal. Also, if the Democrats were to challenge this, it would go to the Supreme Court, and Donald Trump appointed 3 justices to the Supreme Court, and he'll probably appoint 2 more over the next 2 years. So he'll have like a solid majority. So again, I don't know the specifics of what they have in mind. I think he could run for a third term as the vice president, and I think that's the most likely option. But he could also, as this war gets worse and worse, he could also suspend the Constitution, like Zelensky did in Ukraine, right? So I'm pretty confident he will get his third term, though.
It's not just insider trading. They're doing these prediction markets, and he's giving pardons to people who are clearly paying him. The
Yeah.
It's so obvious and nobody speaks about it. You can see the market right before he gives a speech about when he's going to attack Iran again because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. So clearly, there's people on the inside that are making trades, especially in the oil market, but they get away with this organized crime more than I've ever seen anybody get away with this stuff. And
And sorry, but I'm saying he gets away with it because he's doing the bidding of the elite, right? The elite wants this war in Iran, and Trump is doing that. As long as Trump keeps this war going, then the elite will allow him to get away with anything. But once he's out of office, then he'll be destroyed.
other major predictions. So you're predicting that there will be a third term. We saw Miriam Adelson pretty much say that she would fund millions more dollars. What can we expect going forward? When could the ground troop invasion inevitably be? Because there are no signs that we are getting out of this. Besides them declaring victory, this seems like it's going to continue to stretch out.
So I think we're already in a ground invasion phase because of what happened this weekend, right? So remember, there was this pilot that had to eject from his plane, an F-15, that got shut down by the Iranians. And there was a massive search and rescue operation for him that involved hundreds of special forces, as well as possibly thousands of support staff. And that was essentially a ground invasion. That wasn't a ground excursion. And the thing about these things is that, like, once you set the precedent, then there'll be more of these things. So um, let me talk broadly about what happened this weekend, okay? So the fact that the F-15 is shot down shows us that probably more F-15s will be shot down in the future. Because the reality is that these jets are not as invincible as people believe them to be. Also, the Iranians have shown themselves extremely creative. So rather than use radars, I think they lock on heat signatures. Okay, and that's something that the American military didn't expect. So the Iranians are proving themselves much more flexible, much more creative, and much more resilient than people assumed them to be. Because remember, 4 weeks ago, the Americans, according to Peter Hegseth, had already established aerial supremacy, meaning all air defense was knocked out. The other problem is that if the Americans continue with this aerial bombardment campaign, it's going to cause a lot of wear and tear because these are very expensive machines, very sophisticated, and very hard to maintain. They were never designed to fight a long war. They were designed to fight a 2-week war at most. And so as this thing keeps on going, you're gonna have malfunction, which is gonna force these planes to crash into Iran. And so it's impossible to sustain an air campaign for too long. And historically, what you do first is you send in ground forces to clear the air defenses for your airplanes to come in to establish aerial supremacy. And so the Americans will have no choice but to eventually use ground forces to pave the way for their air war. So that's the first point I want to make.
Yeah, and it's
The second point,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry,
Yeah, I was just
go ahead.
gonna let them know, the audience know, that the F-15 jet costs around $90 million, extremely expensive, supposed to be invincible. Similar to the Gerald Ford, these things are supposed to be invincible. And they're declaring that the military is destroyed, the Air Force is destroyed, and their anti-aircraft technology is destroyed. The F-15 being shot down goes against that narrative completely. But please continue.
Yeah, and the other thing is that during this rescue operation, they lost more planes. I think a couple of Black Hawk helicopters were shut down. Two C-130s were stranded, and they had to blow them up because they didn't want the Iranians to capture their planes. So the entire operation cost hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, actually. And I see people on Twitter who are like, this can't possibly be a rescue operation because why would the Americans commit so many resources, take so many casualties just to rescue one pilot? It makes no sense whatsoever. And my argument is this. The Americans, when they fight a war, it's not really about military strategy. It's really more about optics and narrative, right? So, if you're a special operator, if you're Delta or Navy, you're not thinking about how to win this war. You're thinking about after this war, can I get a book deal? Can I get a movie deal? Can I go? I'm serious, man. This is like literally how these guys think. You've got this culture where special forces have taken over the military. They are now the superstars of the military. And for them, what's important is that the military revolves around them and their ego. And this is a problem in the military. And a lot of people have talked about this, where you've got these prima donnas who think that they're the generals and they refuse to take orders from the generals, right? And it's something that's reinforced in popular culture where, you go back to the Osama bin Laden capture. That was like huge news, and they made a movie about it. And these Navy SEALs were invited to give talks and they have book deals and all that. So you've got this culture in the American military and the people, the special operators, it's not about how to win this war. It's about like, how do I look good in this war? And that's why America engages in these like high risk, low reward operations. And this is going to be a huge problem as this war continues because America doesn't have infinite resources, because America can't afford to like every weekend go rescue a pilot and spend like, $1 billion doing so. Yeah. And the other thing is, look, this is exactly what they did in just 2003. So there was this private named Jessica Lynch, Lynch, okay? And her convoy was ambushed by the Iraqis because it got lost from the main convoy. And she was captured as a prisoner of war. She had a lot of injuries, so the Iraqis put her in a hospital, a civilian hospital. And then word got out that she was in the civilian hospital, and the Americans had hundreds of special forces go rescue her. It was a very complex operation that involved a lot of different branches. And this was huge news in America at that time, and it made America feel good. They made a movie about it. The problem is that after the war, Jessica Lynch gave public talk saying the entire incident was fabricated by the Americans. The American military said that I was a prisoner of war being raped by the Iraqis, and they had soldiers guarding me all the time. But the reality was that I was treated very well by the doctors and nurses at this hospital. The military had gone away a long time ago. And you know what? Honestly, they wanted to like put me in an ambulance and send me back to the Americans. But the Americans were shot at this ambulance, so they couldn't do that. And you know what? If they had sent a representative from the American embassy to come and take me home, the Iraqis would have cooperated. Instead, they had sent hundreds of special operators with like fake bullets to stage this commando raid in the hospital to make it look good on TV, and to make movies about it. And so that's what the American military does. It's not about winning wars. It's about looking good, so that you can have a book deal or a movie afterwards. And there's going to be a disaster in this war.
An optics war. And that was the justification for it. In the beginning, they wanted to free the women of Iran of the oppressive burqa. They wanted to save them from their oppressive regime. And now we are going to send them back to the Stone Ages. Even though in the Stone Ages, Iran has been an empire for how long? Thousands of years. But the American empire has been around for less than 250. So they have completely abandoned that. I haven't seen anybody talk about freeing the people of Iran anymore. And I don't know how they're going to be able to justify that, or how the Iranian diaspora who are celebrating this war, how they are justifying the fact that these people in the administration are bragging and are encouraging to bomb their power plants, their water supply, and send them back to literally the Stone Ages, as they're saying. So, of course, America, once we do these wars, that we realize we made all these mistakes. And not only book deals, we're probably going to see movies in 10 years about how much it hurt the soldiers' feelings. There's going to be another American Sniper. There's going to be soldiers crying. It's going to be the sad music. Platoon. Yes. Bradley Cooper will play Pete Hegseth. This is just a cycle of our country.
Look, this war, this war has been a dumpster fire, right? Because now the reason for ground invasion is to control the Strait of Hormuz, now for maritime navigation. The problem with this is that before the war, the Strait of Hormuz was free to open to like maritime navigation. You start this war, and so that's why they went and closed it. Now I think like the reason for the ground invasion is, well, we need to destroy the air defenses. And like the response is, well, if you didn't bomb them all the time, they wouldn't have their defenses. Just so so war has a logical momentum of its own. Once you're in a war, it's almost impossible to get out of it. So this thing will get worse and worse. And one thing that people can't imagine right now is how devastating this will be for the global economy, right? I mean, like, it's entirely possible that in 6 months' time there will be massive lockdowns in America, and there'll be rationing in America. There might be even a national draft in America. You have like National Guard deployed everywhere to control the population in about 6 months' time.
And if people watch your lectures, they would give you more credit because it's the perfect example of the sunken cost fallacy, where once you start losing in the casino, you don't leave. You keep investing more money. You keep spending money on the slot because you need to recoup the losses that you have now accrued. This is by far the best example of that because they can't retreat. They've already declared victory. They've already invested so much money. It's going to obviously continue. A draft would be somewhat ridiculous. They did increase the enlistment age from 35 to 42, meaning now Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and Daily Wire, they can join. So many of the people that were too old are now within the age. So I encourage them to go join up and grab an AR-15. When would the draft be? And would that be the catalyst for some sort of protest at the very least?
Right. So I'm not sure if you saw the news, but Germany has banned military age men from I think 17 to like 35 from leaving the country without permission from the military. Uh, did you see that news?
No.
Like that's clearly Germany is moving towards a draft, right? If you are 17 to 35, a male, you're not allowed to leave the country for more than 3 months unless you had permission from the military to do so, which means you can't leave, okay? Which means that they're moving towards a draft.
I
And I
thought
see something
NATO,
very similar.
Trump's been very critical of NATO, saying that they weren't going to support him.
Right, but I mean, it's all just theatrics, right? At the end of the day, NATO does whatever the Americans tell NATO to do because the people running NATO are American generals. So we are going to see a draft in Germany very, very soon, both for the war in Ukraine and also to aid the effort in the Middle East. And I see a very similar dynamic playing out in America. So I think within the next 6 months, the blueprint for the draft will be made available.
The irony.
And yeah, and I'm not sure how young American men will respond to the draft. I mean, you'll probably have better insight than I do. But I think it's gonna be a dumpster fire. I think it's gonna be very hard to get young American men to agree to go to the Middle East to die. The other thing is that people forget this, but in the Vietnam War, one of the major reasons why Americans lost the Vietnam War is an issue called fragging, Fragging. What it means is American soldiers will kill their commanding officers if they feel their commanding officers are going to put them at risk. And this was a huge problem in Vietnam. And it might be a problem in the Middle East as well, right? When we're hearing stories, rumors, I don't think they're necessarily true, but like there are rumors that sailors are sabotaging their own ships to avoid being deployed in the Middle East. So I think you'll have, if they are sent to war, these soldiers are going to have very low morale, and you'll see some of them engage in acts of sabotage.
I didn't know that was a major issue in Vietnam. And again,
It's a huge issue. It was a huge issue.
the draft in
Yeah.
Germany, just the irony of within 80 years, you saw the way Germany was in the past. And now look that they're going to send their young men who were once completely, literally the opposition to Israel now dying for them within 80 years. It shows just how powerful this empire became. Is there any empire that has risen to this level of power this quickly other than Pax Judaica?
Um, no, not really. I mean, Pax Britannica rose very quickly, but they didn't have as much control as America. And Britain had to share power with the Russians, the Germans, as well. And but America is able to dominate the world by itself, which is incredible.
Another comparison that we can make to what happened 80 years ago in World War II is Ben Gvir passing this new death penalty. So, in the midst of this war, I think they're realizing that they can get away with the Lebanon invasion, but Ben Gvir is celebrating this new law where Palestinian prisoners are subject to a death penalty that is not part of the law for Jewish prisoners. This is the first time, if I'm not mistaken, that a nation has passed a specific death penalty for one race but not for another since Germany in the 30s and 40s. Can Israel keep getting away with what they're getting away with?
Racial supremacy in Israel is a real thing. It's not a conspiracy theory, okay? If you just look at Jewish theology, they believe that they are different from other people, right? So the theology is this, and it goes back to the Kabbalah. So the idea is that God created the first man, Adam Kadmon, and during this creation phase, the vessel broke, okay? And so the divine light broke into 600,000 divine roots. And so if you were to take this theology literally, what it's telling you is that there's only 600,000 humans in this world, and everyone else is just an animal soul, right? And the 600,000 are Jewish souls. And quite honestly, everyone else is an animal that's taking up space. So like you should try to clear up as many of them as possible. So there are these religious extremists in Israel who do not see anyone outside of Israel who is not Jewish as a human being. And so that's what that phrase like mowing the lawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like imagine killing people as like mowing the lawn because, you know, there are weeds and we have to mow the lawn.
Mm-hmm. Is this the truth about the Wailing Wall? I've seen theories that the Wailing Wall, the worship they do there, it looks like it's, for lack of a better term, it looks like they're fornicating with it. The movement is back and forth. And I heard it's because of what you're talking about with Kabbalah magic, that there's a divine feminine and masculine aspect of God. And that this wall, though it was created by the Romans, it represents the feminine nature of God. And so these Israelis are literally having sex with it to try to activate its feminine divine energy. Is this correct?
Okay, so look, I'm not an expert. I'm not a rabbi, right? So I can't tell you, but let me speculate about how this works, okay? So the Kabbalah says this. The Kabbalah says is that God is the will to bestow. Okay, that's what God is. God is all love, all generosity, all compassion, and God wants to uh, bestow. But if you want to bestow, you need something to receive, right? So God, what God does in order to bestow is create the will to receive, which is the first man, Adam Kadmon. Okay, but the problem with the will to receive is that if you're all receiving, you don't understand what bestowing means, right? So let me use a allegory. So let's just say I invite you to my house, and I'm really excited to meet you and share a meal with you. So I spent the whole weekend cooking the most sumptuous meal ever. It's a 10-course banquet, and I'm really excited to have you enjoy this meal. And it's the will to bestow, right? I just want to be open and generous with you. But you come to my house and you look at this sumptuous meal and you are embarrassed by it. You're confused by it. You're like, oh my God, does he want to borrow money from me? Like what's going on here? And like you're embarrassed by it. So like you're like, oh my God, my mom was calling me. So you run away. Okay. So so now I'm like, okay, how to get SNEAKO back in so we can share a meal. Okay. So for the Kabbalists, that is the struggle of life, where God is the will to bestow humanity is the will to receive, but we refuse to receive God's gift. So what this means is that we humans need to engage in a long process of spiritual alchemy to reduce our ego and to appreciate the generosity of God through a process of redemption and repentance, okay? But you can also frame it as the generative principle, which is God, and the productive principle, which is us, okay? And when you marry the two, then you have perfection. You can also see it as the dynamic of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, okay? But the goal of life is a reunion with God, right? And that's why you have to build a third temple, because the third temple allows for God to manifest itself on the world so that we can be reunited with God. So it's not really about sex, it's more about reunion, and because we're not separate. We just imagine we're separate, and that's the root of all issues, right? So I think that's what's going on, where the Jewish people, the religious people are like, like how do we reunite with God? And this action in the Wailing Wall, I mean, like it's not really about sex, it's about coming together again, which is sex basically.
Okay. Okay. So maybe there's something to that theory. Now Netanyahu is bragging about something that you spelled out in your lectures, which is that Greater Israel, which was a conspiracy theory not too long ago, you were called anti-Semitic, is something that he seems like he's bragging about publicly in speeches, and that the Lebanon invasion is something that's going to spread and continue out throughout the Middle East. Can we expect this to happen in the near future? And how much of this blame is going to be placed on Netanyahu? Because I saw Tucker Carlson publish the BB Files documentary. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but a lot of the information in there was unimportant from my perspective. I think there were about 10 minutes that were important. In the BB Files, towards the end, they were spelling out how Netanyahu has a signed document that shows that he was the one directing the transactions from Qatar to Hamas. So essentially, he was funding both sides. This is something that you spell in your lectures, how both sides of a war are funded by the same people so that they can direct chaos and outrage and also profit off of it the most. Netanyahu essentially wanted Hamas to be causing chaos so that Gaza would eventually be destroyed. The hostages were not a main concern of his because he wanted to use the Hannibal Directive. He wanted to destroy it completely, which we now see this is happening. And I've seen a lot of Zionists try to say, oh, it's not all Israelis, it's just Netanyahu. It's not, don't be anti-Semitic, it's the Israeli government and it's specific people. The majority of Israelis hate Netanyahu, they protest him, they think he's a bad person. Ben Gvir was called a terrorist. He's the bad one, not all of us. What is the validity of that theory, and when can we see Greater Israel?
Right. So first of all, there's been a long relationship between Hamas and Netanyahu, right? So 1996, I believe it was 1996, okay, but I mean you can fact check me. He was running for the first time to be prime minister. He was way behind the polls. And then Hamas launched a series of bus attacks in Israel.
Oh, hold on, the audio cut out.
And that allowed minister.
Yeah, we're better
Okay.
now.
And then remember, right before October 7th, Netanyahu was fighting for his political life. He was charged with corruption. He is corrupt. His entire family is corrupt. And there were these special investigations of Netanyahu, and there were millions of people protesting in the streets because Netanyahu wanted to change the judiciary. And it seemed as though Netanyahu was dead politically. And then October 7th happened, and now he's still in power. So I think Hamas and Netanyahu work very well together. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that. And yeah, I mean, like we know for a fact that Qatar is funding Hamas because Netanyahu has instructed them to do so.
Mhm.
The Greater Israel Project, Jewish supremacy, is something that they talk about openly in Israel. I mean, just go to Israel and spend time with Jews, and they'll talk about it openly. And the reason why is that in the Jewish tradition, it doesn't matter what the rest of the world thinks. Who cares? What matters is their relationship with God. Okay, that's the only thing that matters. So as long as they're able to move towards reunion with God, move towards redemption of the Jewish people, that's the only thing that matters. And for this redemption to happen, you need to play out history. That requires the fulfillment of the greater Israel project and the building of the third temple,
Mhm.
right? So the idea that this is Netanyahu is absurd. 80% of people support this war. 80% of Israelis support this war against Iran. And this Greater Israel project is clearly the end goal. And this war in Iran is just a way to achieve this. Because think about what's happening in this war, where eventually the entire world's going to be drawn in. The GCC, Dubai, UAE, Saudi Arabia want this war to continue and want to fight Iran to the finish. And Iran can easily destroy the GCC, right? But once the GCC is destroyed, that clears a path for Israel. Turkey might be drawn into this war as well. And if Turkey is drawn into this war, then Iran can destroy it pretty easily. And then that's another domino that falls.
Mhm.
So this war ends, I think, when the United States is forced to retreat from the Middle East, and then Israel can achieve the Greater Israel project.
The UAE, I've seen some reports, I'm not sure how valid they are, that they are going to join Israel and fight Iran. A lot of people in the GCC, especially the Dubai influencers, they thought that this war was going to be over. They were saying it was going to be over in 24 hours. They were saying everybody's panicking. This outrage is unnecessary. What can we see now over a month into this war? You said that the GCC would never have the same reputation again. Is it really over for these people in the Gulf states?
I think it's completely over. I think there's no hope. And I think like they're desperate. And that's why they want to end this war. You know, really strange, but like last week I got an email from the Dubai government inviting me to speak at a conference in September. I'm like, why would I go, man? Are you guys gonna be around in September? And but yeah, no, I think it's done. I think these things are mirages. I think they were artificial creations. I mean, the idea, I mean, like these are basically slave societies, right? Where you have the Emiratis doing nothing, they're on welfare, and then 90% of people do the work, but they're all expatriates. And it's a caste system where expatriates are given like these very lavish salaries, and then people from the third world, mainly Pakistan, India, Africa, are treated as slaves in that society.
Yeah, I'm seeing the footage now. It's also, Bengalis are out there. They're finally able to go on the beach. And so you can see them, although these workers flooding through.
Yeah.
Actually, a mirage is the perfect analogy for it. A mirage is the idea of this fantasy land created in the middle of the desert. That's essentially what you could describe it as. I don't want to get banned by the UAE for insinuating that. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to. But they are very strict about that. What about, I don't want to hold you up too much of your time. But with the professor conversation coming up from Mehdi Hassan, I think a lot of people are making the comparison between you and Jordan Peterson. I'm not sure if he's still on Daily Wire. Have you compared yourself, well, your careers to him? And what lessons can we learn? Because his reputation is not the same as it once was. He was very popular during the woke push from Larry Fink, as he's now admitted. But nowadays, he has a mental health problem. Which, I mean, you did admit that it was getting difficult for you in March. How can we learn from Jordan Peterson's career?
I think that Jordan Peterson is a brilliant teacher, right? If you just go back and watch his UFT lectures, he had a way of engaging his students. He had a way of showing himself that made him very charismatic, that made him an exemplar role model for young people. And if he just focused on that, I think he could have been a positive force in the world. But his mistake was this. His mistake was when he became popular, he monetized himself. So I think there's this clip of him talking about how much money he makes. And he's like, why make, $60,000? I'm just making this up, okay? But I'm saying I make $60,000 a week doing lectures. I make $20,000 a week doing book sales. I make $30,000 a week on Patreon. And like I know it's a lot of money and it's very tempting, but when you get seduced by that money, you have to sell your soul, I think. I think, yeah, you want to monetize to a certain extent, and I do monetize. I mean, like I don't monetize my YouTube, but I monetize my Substack, and that's a lot of money. It's nowhere near how much Jordan Peterson makes. I think the Daily Wire gave him $60 million for his IP, right? So that's a lot of money. But um, you have to remember that this is how they control you. This is how they get you with money, right? So remember, after October 7th, Netanyahu said, give them hell, Israel, right? So he came out vocally in support of Israel. And you shouldn't do that. I mean, as a teacher, you want to maintain some impartiality. You want to maintain some distance. You want to maintain perspective. But he was taking so much money from these people that he felt that, okay, they're my friends. They're in trouble. I need to speak out. And then he got a lot of backlash for that. That's how they get you. They get you through money. Okay. So I don't monetize my YouTube. And everyone's like, you're insane. You could be generating a lot of money through YouTube and you do a great job on YouTube. So why not just take the cash and enjoy your life? And the answer is because I don't want them to control me, right? So it's a signaling mechanism where like I'm telling them I don't want to monetize my YouTube, so don't come talk to me. I'm gonna shut the door on you. The devil can only come in if you let him in. Okay? You have to invite the devil in. And I'm not gonna invite you guys in, so don't bother. Right? I don't care what you do to me, but I'm not gonna take your money. I'm not going to make a deal with you. You're not gonna and like because what I care about is my soul. What I cares about is being a teacher. And I think that's a mistake that Jordan Peterson made. And like quite honestly, once you make this mistake, you're stuck, man. You are now bought. And if you want to like, you know, change the terms of the contract, if you want to be like, like, I'm sorry, this was not a good deal. I'll give back all your money. Well, certain things can happen to you. You know?
That was my favorite statement from the first interview we did, was that the real wealth is knowledge. Real wealth is not something, not Rothschild goy bucks, as I like to say. It doesn't come from fame. It doesn't come from any of these worldly things. It comes from the pursuit of something greater, enlightenment, as you say. It's something that I think that is more important than ever to pursue right now, especially if the US dollar collapses, which right now the chairman of the Federal Reserve is saying that, look at the writing on the wall. This does not look good. The United States just hit $39 trillion in debt, and this system is only based off of our belief in it. It's only because we believe in this currency that it holds any weight, and people die trying to accomplish and trying to achieve this wealth, this money that literally means nothing besides the stock that we place into it with our own minds. And so being in control of your own mind is the most valuable thing we can do in terms of resistance and revolution. As long as you maintain true independence and you don't rely upon the state, especially when AI is replacing so much of that authority figure, they want to control what's in here. That this is what makes you who you are. That's your soul. So more than ever, that is important. Do you think your audience is predominantly young people? Because you always reiterate how important it is. Obviously, your classes, you teach a high school, but do you think that your influence is with the future?
So I've looked at some analytics, and well, first of all, my audience is heavily skewed towards male, so about 90% male, 10% female. The other thing is that the demographic tends to be middle age, so maybe from like 35 to 45, most are in the Anglosphere, right? So the United States, and Europe, Canada, and I think a lot of it is these are people who received an education and they were not happy with their education, and they've had some life experience. And they're confused by how the world works. And so when they watch my videos, it's almost like a confirmation or validation of their doubt in the world. But I think you need a certain knowledge set. I think you need a certain experience in order to appreciate my teachings. So I'll give an example where, like it's possible, like for one video, I have 2 million views. Okay, so there are too many people watching my videos. In my class, my high school class, there are two students, guys. Okay, like there are no students. So yeah, there are two students in my class because they're too young. They're like 18. They don't know anything, and they're happy-go-lucky. So most students find my class very depressing. But I feel as though that's what education is. Education is about self-annihilation in order to form a proper, more free understanding of how the world works. Basically destroy your brainwashing.
Hmm. So, what should the future generations, what should we invest in? Say the American empire collapses. Do you recommend people like me, should we stay in America? Last time you said that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was predominantly infiltrated by secret societies. I'm not trying to mischaracterize what you said, but essentially that crypto is not as reliable as many people believe. Where do you think, besides wealth and knowledge, where do you see the future for us?
Look, I think for young people in their 20s, the best thing you can invest in right now are human relationships. So cook dinner together, right? Be generous to each other. Go out and hike together. It sounds kind of weird now, but I guarantee you, um, if you were to do this and just focus on building relationships, like building friendships, and focusing on emotional bonds with each other, this is going to be such the most this will be the best investment you will make in the future world, because a new world is coming, and people are going to have to stick together in order to survive this world. It's entirely possible that we'll have to move out of the cities and go back to farming. It's entirely possible this happens, in which case it's probably important to have a community of people that you trust, that you love, working together to grow food together, to support each other, to have families together.
Yeah, establishing real relationships. It's something that since this war started, I can kind of relate to your apprehension to upload and the pursuit of travel and wanting to spend personal time and seeing how it could affect people around you. Because I've noticed, I'm not sure if you have, but you've done a great job. You don't attack anybody. People come at you and you don't really seem to respond. But since the war started, I've also been sleepless. Even like in this interview, I have hardly been sleeping beforehand. I don't feel as sharp as I uh, wanted to be or was in previous interviews with you. I've been editing too much and just looking at the news too much, interacting on Twitter too much. What have you realized is the way to stay away from that chaos, and what advice would you give to really be strong amidst all the craziness we see online?
Right. So I think the another mistake that Jordan Peterson made was too much online engagement,
Mhm.
where he was actually responding to his critics on social media. And what you need to recognize is that most people are trolls. They're just trying to provoke a response from you. And like they're just trying to make you angry. And so my number one rule is do not respond online. If you want to have a conversation with me, let's do it in a conversation, right? A long form conversation where you're allowed to present your perspective and where I'm allowed to present my perspective. But like, I don't want to be a keyboard warrior where I'm debating my critics online, because they would be much more effective at trolling me than I am them. So my number one rule is do not respond to social media. Like I receive social media and I look at comments now and then, but I don't read YouTube comments. My wife does. My wife reads YouTube comments. I do not read YouTube comments. Okay, so I apologize if I don't respond. Okay, and I try not to read comments. I just try to focus on being me. I try to
Mhm.
focus on trying to form a coherent understanding and framework for the world. And I don't want to be disrupted by this. Okay. So I don't engage online, but I also don't engage offline as well. Meaning I don't go and give lectures. I don't go and meet fans, and like, I'm sorry um if I seem antisocial, but again, it's to protect my personal health, my
Mhm.
mental health, it's to protect my family, and it's to ensure that I can be the best when I go teach in the classroom.
That's a mindset that I need to definitely adapt. It's different because, we grew up with social media. So that troll nature is pretty much ingrained in so many of it's ingrained in our DNA to be engaging. And I have to figure out, yeah, I've always noticed that it's better when you're just creating. When you're producing
Yes.
and you're actively trying to make it better, that's when you're at your happiest. And that's when actually you are the best creator. As soon as you get involved in the cesspool, that's when your energy's pulled away and you're not making anything. You're just engaging and giving people attention. And all they really want is attention. It's extremely important. And you don't really seem like you have felt the temptations to get involved in that, which is definitely part of your success.
So, I mean, the thing to know about me is that I've been famous before. People forget, but like I am China's like most famous educator, and so I get interviewed by New York Times, Wall Street Journal, BBC all the time. And in my early 30s, I blew up online because of certain interviews I did about China's education system. I'm very critical of it, and I was Googling myself every day. And at a certain point, I'm like, why am I Googling myself every single day? This is silly. And I understand like the sort of the rush. It's like a drug, right? Like, oh my God, all this attention, and you're Googling myself to see like how many news reports use your name. And so I've been there, I've done that. I understand like what the feeling is. I understand how, like if you just start focusing on your own fame, it makes you anxious. It makes you fame is really a drug, right? Where, if today you got like 10,000 views, but the next day you get 1,000 views, then you just fall into a deep depression. And so I've been there and I've done that. And so I know how to protect myself now.
Yeah, it's when your self-worth is derived through numbers on a screen. That's another form of currency. You're controlled in that way, the same reason that people like Jordan Peterson were able to be controlled. So, yeah, I wish you the best of success. Please don't quit. We want to keep watching the lectures. And the other student's name it's Amber. What's the other student's name? I can't remember.
Well, there's Vincent and there's
Vincent.
Alan.
Alan,
They're
right,
the
right,
most
right.
consistent. Yeah, they're the most consistent, and then Amber comes now and then. So there's three. Yeah.
So the conspiracy theory that you're speaking to an empty classroom, that's been debunked. You have videos where you can meet the students in the class and
And
you
they
can
ask
see,
questions,
yeah, they do.
and they do ask questions. Yeah, at the end of the class. Yeah.
Sometimes you get annoyed with Vincent's questions. Sometimes Amber could read a little bit faster. Okay, if you could please ask her to read a little more a little more passion. When she's reading stuff about
Yeah.
Greek Empire and stuff, it's just a little too monotone for my taste, and I have to skip over and read it myself. But I look forward to it. I subscribe to your Substack. I highly recommend people subscribe to it. There's been great updates. I think you post there how often? Maybe twice, three times a week.
I post once a week. So my Substack is different in that I try to post long form analysis of the war because, like people on Twitter and people get news. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to provide a deeper analysis of how to connect the current events together.
I want to correct a mistake earlier. It is because I'm tired. I said angel Jibril instead of angel Iblis, but it was jinn. It was a jinn, not an angel. I've not been
Right.
sleeping properly at all for like the past
Yeah.
month. And last thing, I just want to ask you, what sort of, I don't know, you probably hardly see my content, and I guess I did ask it, but do you have any, how do you think from your view, from Professor Jiang's view, that I could improve in this space?
Yeah, I think like what would be really interesting is if like rather than doing like online interviews, you actually invited people and do like in-person conversations.
You're all the way in
That
China.
that
You're,
that,
you're
that
far. You're all the way to a different time zone.
well, we could meet somewhere, I mean, if you're ever traveling, I could meet you somewhere. But I'm saying like if you're able to talk to people in person, that I think is much more effective. So I highly recommend like more in-person interviews. Another thing that I think is maybe try to bring different people together, right? So I would love to have a conversation with David Icke, and you could moderate it.
Mhm.
That I think would be really interesting for people. If that goes well, I'm also interested in talking to Alexander Dugin. I'm not sure if you know who he
I
is,
do.
but he's Russian, and I'm very like we're online friends, so I can arrange that very easily. I don't know David Icke, and he hates me for whatever reason. So you have to get in touch with him yourself. But I can get in touch with David with Alexander Dugin, and I think what might be interesting is if there's more like different people together having a conversation.
I didn't know if you were up to
So
that. A lot of people have been suggesting that, but I wasn't
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I never.
I'm completely up to like a long form, good faith discussion.
Do you know George Galloway?
I do, yes. He's interviewed me, yes.
Okay, perfect. And also, do you know Professor Morandi?
I've not, I actually don't know him. I have deep respect for him and what he does. I mean, it's incredible the work he's been doing. I mean, like he doesn't sleep. He's been just been the most passionate and articulate advocate for Iran.
So after the David Icke interview, I'm gonna do my best to set that up, open invitation. I think the next one should definitely be with Professor Morandi. I think that would be a
Sure.
great conversation to facilitate. I'm not sure when you're next available. I'll email you about that. And then George Galloway, I thought that he was very interesting to speak to. I think he had a good perspective on social space-ism. And a lot of people are saying, oh, look, you're just buying into that ideology. No, it's right now there's a debt crisis, there's a housing crisis, and the elite class control it. It's not that I'm a far leftist like people are trying to categorize me at. I never say left and right. It's all about right and wrong. And somebody needs to address that problem instead of, we're spending $200 billion. Well, they want $200 billion more dollars from the Pentagon. Trump is saying that he can't afford daycare and Medicare for all because of all these senseless wars.
Yeah, he's honest. That's what makes Trump so annoying to liberals because he's just honest about everything, right? Liberals prefer that you just lie and be hypocritical, whereas Trump's like, nah, screw that. I'll just be honest. I'm telling you right now, we can't afford daycare because we have this war in Iran, and like that's his truth. Sorry, man.
I think they tried to wipe that from the internet, but he can just say it right in front of our faces and we continue to eat it up. But these conversations, community and knowledge, all this is important to resist what's coming. So I look forward to these future conversations. Professor Jiang, I will continue to call you this as a sign of respect in Chinese culture. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate your time. God bless you. And I will look forward and schedule future conversations.
Great. Thanks so much, SNEAKO. Bye-bye.
Bye. Great interview. Great interview. My apologies for the mistake on Angel Jabril. I am exhausted right now. I'm very, very tired. I thought that was a great interview. W's up in the chat. Always a pleasure to have Professor Jiang on. I have not been, I could really feel it. I don't know if you guys can tell it, but I've been editing nonstop and I was sick beforehand. I've not been resting and it's been a lot. And I've been, it's been a lot, especially since the war started, but I'll be back on the schedule. Tomorrow I'll be back on that, doing the 8 to 10 hours every single day. Would you guys, best one yet? Let's go. Let's go. And shout out to everybody watching this on YouTube as well. Thank you so much. I saw that you guys loved the first two interviews. And so looks like we're going to continue this back and forth, and best of luck to Professor Jiang with Patrick Bet-David tomorrow.